Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for your patience. This is the 2018 second quarter Next Gen 911 GIS user group. I like to have these every quarter just to kind of keep everyone updated on all the different bits and pieces on the project going on, because everyone has, we have great participation, and we also have a lot of information to always update you on. So welcome, and we'll just jump right into it. Okay, so the agenda is our usual lineup. We're going to go over kind of a bit of a project update. I'll cover that part. And then I probably should have changed that, but so Sherry's going to talk about geospatial call routing, not necessarily just preparing GIS data, but for what all's going on with geospatial call routing with the project. Then Kristen will be giving an update on the Next Gen 911 toolbox, and we'll talk about some upcoming events for the Kansas Next Gen 911 GIS community. Okay, so just kind of a quick project update. For the 2018 first quarter, we once again had 100% participation, so thank you everyone for your diligence in getting your data submitted. We actually had 99 counties submit updates to their data. And we had 6 counties verify that they had no changes for the quarter. So as it works out, we have the data submitted by county, and we'd love to see that add up to a nice 105 for the counties, and to hear from everyone each quarter to see if they have any updates. Also a reminder that for this quarter, the deadline is June 30th, and this is the quarter that you need to submit your data in the version 2.1 of the GIS data model. So this is the official deadline for getting your data migrated over that data model, and I'm sure Kristen will probably talk about that in a little bit in the toolbox update. So where we're at, we now have 82 PSAPs. Everyone in green is now on the hosted solution. So that's pretty tremendous. We're kind of filling up the state there. All the counties in blue are pending, so they'll be joining the hosted solution in the next couple of months. The purple counties are on their own hosted solution right now, but expressed interest in maybe migrating to the hosted solution, and then the counties in orange and yellow are on their own existing system, and at this time don't have any plans to join the hosted solution. So I think once everything's all said and done, you know, we'll have 85 here pretty quickly, and then thinking we'll be 90 or over 90 once we kind of get to the point where everyone's settled into what solution they'll be in for the next few years. So, so it's very exciting to have that many on board. So part of this project is, like I said, the first piece was migrating everyone to the hosted solution. So that was a huge infrastructure lift. That was really setting up the whole IP network. Well, the next component, which everyone's getting their data ready for geospatial call routing and their GIS data, is part of the infrastructure also had to be upgraded to be on what's called the EZNet, or the Emergency Services IP network. So there's been a lot of work going on in the background with our project partner, AT&T, to make those cuts start happening. And we actually had Reno County cut over to the official AT&T National EZNet on April 11th. And that was a pretty historic event because of the first PSAP really to cut over to the National EZNet. The procedure is once they cut over, I think it's kind of funny, they have to do a 30-day soak. I'm like, to make sure, just to test, to make sure everything works right. It's, you know, they're taking live calls just to make sure, you know, operating the PSAP just like everyday normal daily operation to make sure everything's working fine. So it's had the 30-day soak. So really the next steps will be our next group of PSAPs that will migrate over to the EZNet will take place this summer. And if you're part of that group, you know it, and I'm sure he's going to mention that a little bit later in the call. And we're pretty much the infrastructure and the GIS data is there. There's just some other behind-the-scenes data components and pieces to the project that still have to line up for us to move forward. So that's kind of where we're at with the EZNet cuts. Another thing that's been developing is right now in the hosted solution, the current mapping software is called Vesta Locate. So you've heard me talk about this almost all of these calls and at different events around the state. So Vessel Locate is actually the software that is used by the call handlers when they receive a 911 call. That's what the map shows, the GIS data and their aerial photos on when they take those calls. Well, we were recently notified that that project has had an end-of-life announcement, which we kind of knew was coming because its development and certain things were starting to phase out. So right now, the Next Gen 911 Executive Committee is evaluating different software update options, what we want to do for upgrading that software and seeing what all the software options are. We're also evaluating system requirements, the project timeline, and all sorts of things fall into that. So, so really the big news there is there's no change in your procedures on how the data is submitted, the data model, anything like that. This is just more just a heads up that eventually this won't happen soon because will be a huge deployment on how this rolls out, but eventually the software that delivers the GIS data for the call handlers will be getting an update. So probably more modern view to the data. So just letting you know that's something that's in the works. So the next thing I want to talk about was the imagery update. And since we had no spring, we went right from winter to summer, they were actually able to acquire the entire state this winter. They just had a longer flying season than normal with pretty good leaf-off conditions. So a reminder that is statewide, 1 foot leaf-off, natural color, and CIR imagery that'll be delivered. So where we're at with that is they really just wrapped up flying about mid-April. So they are currently doing the processing needed to get the imagery ready for QA/QC. They're predicting they'll deliver that in blocks, similar to kind of like regions around the state. And they think they'll have the first block, they'll probably start out west and process to the east. So they'll have the first block or two available for review in what's called CertCheck, which is Surdex's, their in-house QA/QC tool. So the neat thing about that is they will be allowing us to have logins so that we can not only be doing QA/QC with the Next Gen 911 GIS committee, but we're going to also reach out to a lot of you locals to have a look at the imagery as well. Because Surdex has been a great partner, they understand that you know, they want the best imagery delivered possible, so they want our feedback, and that includes even if you remember last time, we found some areas that were a little too leafy, as we like to call it, from the previous delivery, and they did refly those. So we want to make sure the imagery adheres to the standards and is good quality. So they're giving us the opportunity to review that. So we'll be reaching out when we know more about when that data is processed and ready for review. We'll be reaching out to some partners to help us review that. So I would guess that would be, they said late June, so that's why I put, let's just say July, when we'll actually have access to CertCheck to review the imagery. And so with that, they've not given us a date, but I would suspect that we wouldn't see services or file, like the raw file delivery until at least, I would say late fall or winter of this year. And those might even be delivered in blocks as well. So as we know more, I'll share that with you, but that's kind of just a rough timeline at this point in time. Just a reminder, this is also licensed imagery. So once it is delivered, we'll be putting up another request option, so you can request it through the desk website. It's the same licensing agreement that the imagery, if you're a local or state government, or if you're a private entity doing business using the imagery on behalf of a local or state government, you can have access to the imagery, but you have to do it through a request. So we'll also share that when that is available. You can start submitting your request. The high resolution BIA program is still available. So just a reminder, we have about 7 jurisdictions that have participated in this so far. And Surdex gave this option that if any local governments wanted to have their own set of imagery flown at a different resolution. So some of the jurisdictions that have participated have had county-wide 6-inch resolution flown. Many of them have had cities flown at 3-inch, so there's some different options there. And this is still available, so even though they acquired the entire state this year, It doesn't mean that you can't still take advantage of this agreement and have them fly it next winter or even the winter after that. So it's available throughout the 3-year contract. So don't feel like you missed the boat if you didn't get this agreement in place for this year, because there's still opportunity out there. So the best thing to do if you're interested is to contact Tim Donzie at Surdex directly, and then once you reach out to him, he communicates with us on who's interested and pricing and all that good stuff. So so keep in mind that that's still an option. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to turn over to Sherry, but let me find you, Sherry, so I can unmute you. So one moment here. Okay, Sherry, you should be unmuted.
I believe that I am.
Excellent.
Awesome. So I am going to give you guys an update on the whole GEO-MSAG process and geospatial call routing and the things that are going on with that right now. If you could run to the first slide, Eileen. Thank you. So I've got some kind of news items just to get you guys up to date. So Dickinson County and Reno County both have had their MSAGs switched out for GEO-MSAGs. So that is our very first time doing this, and I kind of get the idea. Well, I know for certain it is our AT&T database group's first time doing this. And so there have been quite a few kinks that have to be worked out in everybody's understanding. One of the things that's happening with this whole project, and we've been talking about this for some time, but one of the things that's happening is these two worlds of GIS and 911 are colliding. And communication and the understanding of what each side does has always sort of loomed as something that we knew was going to be a bit of a barrier, and that there was going to be a lot of education and a lot of sort of feeling our way around until everybody was comfortable. And that's happening right now. And will probably continue to happen, especially for the first big grouping of PSAPs that will get converted. So I put on the list the next 14. I have been in contact with the first 8 of those because they're the group that's coming first, and I will soon be in contact with the other 6 just to communicate and kind of let everybody know where we're at and what's going on. But like I said, we're still sort of feeling our way through this process, both with AT&T's database people and with local MSAG administrators. And originally, if you guys remember from last user group session, I said that by May, we would actually be working on Rice, Stafford, Harper, and Barton, and we obviously aren't. And those won't be coming, in fact, until June. And the reason for that is that the application that is required for you guys or people at your 911 centers to review any errors caused by your GIS data in the future, that application is not yet ready for us. We have been in it, we have moved around in it a little bit, but the map interface on it is not yet ready. They're working through a couple of bugs. So as soon as that is ready, then we will move forward with the next group of counties. So that's kind of what the pause is. It doesn't actually affect the GEO-MSAG conversion, this application, but what it does mean is that if you have updates in the future, there's no real easy way for you to go in and see them. So we want to wait till that application is available. In the meantime, alignment is continuing, and the alignment reports are still going out, and people are still working on that. And I just kind of wanted to report that we have 76 counties, over 99% aligned, which is really wonderful news. I say it all the time, but it is very true. It is astounding to us and something that the state of Kansas is becoming known for, because it is the type of data alignment that you just don't see. So well done to you guys. Thank you very much for all the work that's gone into that. And if you have any questions or any problems with your alignment stuff, you can always give me a shout. If you have questions about the tools or how they're working, you can get with me, with Eileen, with Kristen, and we will do our best to help you continue to excel in that process. So could you take the next slide? Cool. Now, what I thought would be a good idea, since I've gone over the reason for doing this a lot with training and different meetings, is to kind of tell you guys what we know about the GOMSAG process, what you can expect. So the very first thing that's going to happen is that I may be contacting you with questions about ESNs or emergency service numbers to help organize the move to the EZNet, because this is a big infrastructure transition in the background, and ESNs are a big part of how the system works today. They will be replaced when we move to geospatial call routing, but that is not immediate, and it will probably, ESNs will probably be the backup in case any piece of the geospatial call routing section fails. So these are going to be here for a while. So as you get ready to move to an EZNet, you've got to review your ESNs and make sure everything's cleaned up. And we have found in the immediate reviews that we've done that some of the workarounds people put in place in previous years, and by people, I mean usually telephone company people, these are things that didn't involve the PSAP at all most of the time. They have left a little bit of clutter in that ESN list. So we're working to clean that up as you transition. So the very first thing you'll probably hear is me communicating with you with questions about ESNs. And the types of questions I've asked, I had to call Rice County here a couple of weeks ago or email them and ask, does your sheriff's department serve any area outside of your county? Which they probably thought was a very weird question. But I needed to know that because there was an ESN in their neighboring county that looked like the sheriff's department went over there. It didn't, and that was just some of that clutter I was talking about. But I'll be calling with maybe questions like that or questions about the numbers you've chosen to use for ESNs just to make sure we can get all that stuff clean. So the next thing that'll probably happen is that we will ask someone from the 911 center to confirm the responders that will show up, the police, fire, and EMS things that will show up on their alley display. So this is the stuff that pops onto their screen when they receive a 911 call. And we've been trying to figure the best way to sort of get confirmation that that data is correct from the 911 centers before they make this transition. And shockingly, as GIS people, we came up with a map. So we'll be asking them to sign on to a map that will just show the polygons for ESNs that you guys have submitted, and then displayed labeling those polygons, the police, fire, and EMS text that will be displayed on the dispatcher screen. And so what you guys as GIS people might be hearing after they have reviewed this is, hey, I looked at their map and my boundary was off. If that's the case, that means that you have an ESN boundary. This is for the ESZ layer. So you have an ESN boundary that is off, and you need to adjust that and then adjust the address points and street center lines within it. Or perhaps what they say instead is, the boundaries look fine, but you said that this is Fire Department A, and it's actually Fire Department B. And that really is just a piece of information that we need. When they look at this map, they'll be getting a spreadsheet back that shows the police, fire, and EMS for all of these areas. And that just needs to be kind of an edit in that spreadsheet for us to make sure AT&T has the information. Don't worry about memorizing those instructions, because when that time comes, we'll be communicating with you individually about what needs to happen. Just as GIS people, you may not directly be involved in this process until they come back with the results from the map. So if they come back from something like that and have a question or a concern that you don't really understand what they were looking at or why they feel like it's wrong, then you can always just give us a shout. We should be able to help you out. After that alley display is confirmed, you'll get a notification from me that your GIS data is about to be pulled. So if you have any last minute edits, say you just found an error and you got it corrected, or you have a new subdivision you've added, or whatever else. If you have any last minute edits that you want to get in before this process goes, I'm going to try to give you at least a week or two to get that accomplished before we pull your data and send it off. I've already made that notification to the first 8 counties. And so now they're kind of sitting in a holding pattern, so we may end up pulling another set of data for them. But like I said, in the future, I'm going to try to give you a couple of weeks. So just in case you have edits you want to get in, you can do that. Then the next thing that will happen, or should happen, is that your agency is going to need to decide who will be maintaining this data going forward. Now, obviously, from a GIS perspective, you probably already have that decided. But for many counties and many PSAPs, the person handling the MSAG and the person handling the GIS data are different people. And with this process changing, you're just going to have to decide locally if it's going to continue that way, if you're going to consider having somebody from GIS do more of the MSAG work, if you're going to consider maybe having a vendor do some of the work, whatever. It's just a time to think it over and consider what you have going on locally and if that still looks as viable as a solution in the new world as it did in the old. So, and again, this whole process will be communicating pretty frequently. So if there are any questions or concerns that you need more information to make that decision or to understand what your part in that decision might be, you can always get with me. So next slide. Thank you. So these first 2 items are not things that you guys will do, they're things that will happen. So once we have notified you that your data is going to be pulled and we actually pull that data, your data goes to West Safety Services through something that is called EGDMS, or the Enterprise Geospatial Data Management System. You don't need to know too much of that because you won't have to interact with EGDMS, hopefully. West processes the data through that portal, and then they go through the process of creating your GeoMSAG and then getting rid of your original MSAG and replacing it with the new one. And that process takes a little time. There are more hands involved in that than I thought when we first started this project. And they're telling me that we could be looking at anywhere from a week to 2 weeks between when the data is submitted and when that conversion happens. And because this first group particularly, we're going to submit a big bunch all at once, they may take several weeks to get all 8 of them processed at one time. So that's what's happening in the background. And so everything will go quiet for a little while. I'll tell you that we've taken your data, and then you probably won't hear from anyone again until we notify you that your GeoMSAG is now in place. At that point, we're going to provide some training on its ongoing maintenance. And there could be a training webinar or a video to watch from West Safety Services about how to use their software for looking at any errors introduced by the GIS data. But we know there's going to be training from us because we're going to make sure as well as we can that you guys understand the impact of decisions you make in GIS and how they're going to impact that MSAG going forward. Because that can be, it works the exact same way now, it's just not as automated. So there's more hands in the process and more opportunity for people to talk and ask questions. So we want to make sure that as you move to this more automated process, that you kind of understand the impact of your decisions and get an idea of how to resolve some of the most common problems that you may be contacted with. So that will be hopefully the final step. You'll get the training and then you'll be off on a GeoMSAG, and at that point, no edits will be made to the system other than you submitting or resubmitting GIS data. Okay, thank you. So this process, we are piloting this process, not just with Reno County, but we are piloting it actually for West and AT&T as well. They've never done this job together, at least not from the GeoMSAG perspective. So there are a few things that we have learned. The very first one is that if you are not 100% aligned before you get a GeoMSAG, you're going to get that way after you get a GeoMSAG. And this is what I mean by that. we can move forward with you being 99% or more. That's the limit that we have put on it. And like I said earlier, we have 76 911 centers that are there, or 76 counties that are there. But those last few records will not, I always wondered what was going to happen with those records, because it didn't make any sense to me that they were just going to hang out there. And what we were originally told was that they would be hand managed by West, meaning that they would, I guess, look on maps. I'm not really sure what they originally envisioned hand management to look like. But what we know it looks like now is what happened at Reno County. And that is that they were 99.6% aligned, something like that. And what they had left was about 50 records that were not lined up with their data for various reasons. And they got switched over to a GOMSAG. And then the very first thing that happened is AT&T West said, when are you going to fix these other 50? Those records have to get aligned. There's not an immediate timeline for that alignment. The 911 calls from those phone numbers will continue to work, and it's not like there's a life safety threat with this, but we know that you have to get all of it cleaned up. So as much as as much as people like to talk about Nina's 98% alignment, and the council talks about the 99% limit, the reality is that we have to figure out what to do with all of these records. So if you are preparing, you know your county is coming up in the next few months or whatever, I highly encourage you to try to get all of these issues, or as many as possible, resolved before this transition. Because once the transition takes place, it becomes more of a pain to get them fixed. You no longer have the same freedom, you no longer have the same access to the records as you do right now. So it's much better to fix them before the transition than after. So if you've got any records that are giving you a problem, and a lot of you have done this anyway, but if you have any records that are giving you a problem, you're not sure what to do with them, make sure you drop me a note, and I will do what I can to work with AT&T or with you to see if we can't get them resolved. It's always going to be better to do them before this transition than after. So that's our number one lesson. The number two lesson is that comprehension and communication are really key here. We have been running into quite a few stumbling blocks talking to people who do not know what GIS is. And so they don't understand the limitations or the benefits that GIS can bring to the process. And in a very similar way, you're probably going to run into that locally if you have somebody handling the MSAG that is not familiar with GIS. So be aware that there's probably going to be an education component involved in all of this, and it's important to communicate and to remember that some of the people that we're communicating with on this stuff don't necessarily understand how GIS is going to impact this. So as much as you can do to help, especially the people in your agency who have to deal with this, understand what's going on with your GIS, the better you and they will be in the end. And then the final point, the most relieving one, because a lot of the stuff I've talked about has been about troubles that we've had, but if your GIS data is correct, in all likelihood, you won't have much to manage in the future for this. Because if your GIS data is correct and there are no, accidental deletions or changes in spelling or anything like that, chances are you're not going to have to deal with any more telephone records that are inaccurate once you get this set you have now cleaned up. Because your GIS data will forever be the gatekeeper for getting new phone numbers into the system, so they'll always have to match your GIS data to sort of get where they're going. So as long as you can keep your data in good shape, this should be a very easy process once the transition is over. The transition is going to be, like I said, a little messy, and we have to clean up all of the telephone records, either on the front end or on the back end. But once you get past it, it's something that we shouldn't have to think about or worry about too much anymore. So I know that was a whole lot of stuff. Are there any immediate questions or anything? Eileen, can you unmute for a second in case somebody's got a question for me to answer on this?
Yeah, let me see here. What's over here? Okay. Okay, now participants are unmuted, so if you have a question, go ahead. You still might have yourself muted too. Keep that in mind.
And if you come up with any questions in the future, you're welcome to, like I said, you're welcome to get with me on it. But just in case anybody had anything burning right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat either. So okay, great.
Awesome. Thanks.
I'm going to mute you all again, but that doesn't mean you can't ask questions later. So I'll mute you. Okay, now we will hand it over to Kristen.
Okay, I'll be doing the KSNG911 toolbox update, and we can go to the next slide because that one's boring. So nothing huge happened in the last update. We had a whole bunch of small changes, quite a few edits to how parsing happens out of the check TN list tool, mostly for handling various highway name setups. So if you are running the check TN list tool and your records just aren't parsing correctly, just let me know. We've got different ways we can tweak that so that things do parse correctly and more addresses match up. The biggest change that we had in the tool that will affect the results that you're seeing on your end is how we had to handle the frequency check. And this is a handling of blank versus null values. So the next slide has some images on what we ran up against. We do all our stuff in geodatabase format, but West does all of their stuff in shapefile format. Geodatabases have the excellent feature of having null values. And when you run a frequency check and all the records are the same, but then you can see in this graphic how the HNS and then the STP field, one is blank and one is null. In a geodatabase, those are different things, and so the records are not flagged as identical. However, when you export that geodatabase feature class into a shapefile, it automatically converts null values into blanks. So then all of a sudden, what was formerly null is now blank, blank equals blank, and it creates identical records. So I just kind of wanted to explain, hopefully this alleviates any frustrations that people were having with this. It's a data format issue, and we really want things to work on the West end. So if these do get flagged, hopefully they should be pretty straightforward to take care of, because we really don't want identical records in the data sets. So that's a quick note on what happened with that. So we can go ahead. Migrating to the 2.1 geodatabase format. So for the June 30th submission, all PSAPs are required to have everything submitted in the 2.1 format. So from now, there's about 4 weeks left, and after the count, we had 17 PSAPs still need to convert before June 30th. Leave yourself plenty of time. If you need to migrate, start this afternoon after the webinar, start tomorrow, start next week, start as soon as possible. And these things can take some time. There are several steps involved, and we put together a YouTube training video, a how-to document. Since this process is a little bit more involved than some of the other conversions, so you know, you aren't left hanging out to dry or anything. Please let me know if you have issues, but let me know as soon as possible. You know, we don't really want to wait till June 29th to answer your burning questions. just because you procrastinated. Procrastination has natural consequences, and please avoid that if you possibly can. Your emergency doesn't mean it's my emergency. You have been warned. I have a teenager, so
that means.
Yeah, natural consequences. Okay. So future developments. In the next version of the tool, there will be a polygon topology check that will start appearing as notices. These will turn into errors eventually, but we like giving you the heads up of these things as notices so they can get fixed sooner rather than later. If you have been keeping up on your polygon topology, this won't be an issue and nothing will get flagged. We're doing this because of ESB boundaries. Sometimes for counties that haven't kept up on the polygon topologies, they're starting to get some gaps and overlaps, and we can't have that after transitioning. So now's the time to get that in ship shape, tip-top shape. Yeah, whatever you want to call it. So one of the other future developments that we've talked about in the past is an Orion address and an NG911 address comparison tool. After there's so much stuff going on, we decided to kind of put this tool on hold for a little while. Due to what's going on with West and AT&T, there have been quite a few things tossed back at the counties for data editing. So we felt like we don't want to overwhelm anybody. We're just going to put this on pause for a little bit until, until some of the other NG911 requirements slow down a little bit, just so there's no added pressure to do yet one more thing. Another development that's not on here because it just happened this morning, I'm doing some edits and we're testing with Sedgwick County right now. The RCL match conversion process was not working in ARC Pro. So Sedgwick County is testing the fix right now because their data set's so big it takes a while. So there will be a new version of the toolbox coming out probably next week or the week after to get that fix out. The RCL match conversion tool works just fine in ArcGIS Desktop, so there was just a tweak that we had to do for ARC Pro, but that's something I wanted to just mention because it's in the works. Let's see, I think that's all I have.
Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for Chris, and I'm going to unmute everyone. So does anyone at this time have any questions about any of the toolbox discussion? All right, I don't see anything in the chat. Okay, well, as Kristen said, follow up with her if you have any questions and get that version, that conversion to version 2.1 started. Okay. Okay, so really, the last couple slides are just wrap up. Just to mention that Sherry again is leading the NextGen 911 GIS Local Data Steward and Data Maintainer certification classes. We had a class already in Wichita a week or so ago, and there are 2 more coming up, one in Hayes on June 5th, and one in Topeka on August 21st. The registration link is available on the DASC website under the NextGen 911 Initiatives link, and it's also available on the Kansas 911 Coordinating Council's website. So please get registered for those classes. Those are really the only other 2 that are scheduled this year. There's just it's just a busy year with schedule conflicts. So I know Sherry, did you want? Let's see here. I'm going to unmute Sherry in case she wanted to say anything else. So give me 1 second here. Okay. All right, Sherry, you're unmuted if you wanted to add anything to that.
I just wanted to kind of let people know, because I've had some questions about why we're not holding any more classes, that it largely has to do with my schedule, and a lot of it has to do with these EZNet conversions and the time that it takes there. What we are doing, or at least the plan is right at the moment, I can't give you a specific date, but it'll be before winter this year, we'll be putting out just an update video It may be a live webinar that you could attend, or it may be something that I record separately, kind of like the training videos were, that just hits the highlights of the updates that happen in class. So if you can't get to a class, but you're concerned that with so few classes you're not going to be able to find out about the new stuff that's going on, don't worry too much, because there will be a video and or webinar for you to attend that just hits the highlights of the new changes. So we're going to continue offering these classes over time, but we can't keep up the pace that's been going the last few years while we've got so many other things going on. So these update videos may be maybe your method of getting new information quite frequently in the future. So that's all I wanted to add.
Great, thanks, Sherry. And I think to that, just a reminder that if you're a new data steward or a new data maintainer, you still are required to attend the class in person, at least initially the first time. And then after that, the idea is that this new webinar, recording, or whatever we decide to roll out will be how you can kind of do continuing education for the certification. So, so we hope to see you all there. We had a really good turnout at the Wichita class the other day. Also, the next KSNG911GIS user group webinar will be in August. Date to be decided once I synchronize calendars with Kristen and Sherry. So we'll let you know that a little ahead of time, and I'll try to do a better job setting out a reminder closer to the webinar as well. And then the final slide is the usual. Here are the links that I just mentioned. If you need any information on the GIS training or anything, at least on the DASC website, GIS related to the project, or the Coordinating Council website, if you want to know what the Coordinating Council was doing, or meeting minutes, or what the other committees are up to, check out the website and you should be able to find your information you're looking for there. Okay, well with that, I think that concludes our user group meeting today. So I want to thank everyone for coming, and hope you stay dry. I think there's some rain coming, and we'll put the link to the presentation slides and the recording of the webinar out on the website here in the next day or two. All right, and if you have any questions, just contact us. All right, thank you, everyone.